Ellis Marrow entered the Osbury shipping building at exactly 7:30 a.m., as she had done for the past 6 years. A petite woman with chestnut hair pulled back into a practical bun, she quickly climbed the stairs to the second floor of the 2-story red brick building located on the main street of the provincial town of Osbury. She was carrying a paper cup of coffee, not for herself, but for Norton Parker, the company's owner, who usually arrived at 8. "Good morning, Myra," Ellis greeted the woman at the reception desk. "How are the kids?" "Busy," she smiled. "Jason caught a cold and was coughing all night. I'll bring some honey and ginger from my father tomorrow," Ellis promised as she passed by. "It works better than all those syrups from the pharmacy." She quickly crossed the open-plan office, which was now almost empty except for a couple of early arrivals who were already turning on their computers. Her own desk was in the reception area in front of Norton Parker's office. The door had a sign that read, "Norton Parker, CEO," with a modest inscription next to it, "Ellis Marrow, Assistant Director." The title she had originally been given 6 years ago had long since ceased to reflect her actual role in the company, but neither she nor Norton cared. Ellis put the coffee on the desk and turned on her computer. First, she checked her email. Dozens of new messages demanded her attention. She quickly sorted them, responding to those that couldn't wait and leaving the rest for later. At 5:55, the phone rang. "Ellis Marrow, Osbury Shipping," she answered automatically. "Miss Marrow, this is Gerald Hewitt from Hewitt Electronics. We have a problem with your latest shipment." Ellis grimaced. Hewitt Electronics was one of the company's largest customers, and any problem with their orders meant potential financial losses. "What's the matter, Mr. Hewitt?" "We've been informed that the container with the components is delayed at the port by 48 hours. This is unacceptable. We have a production cycle, and every hour of downtime costs thousands." "I understand," Ellis replied calmly, opening the delivery database. "Let me check the situation and call you back in half an hour." She hung up and immersed herself in her work. 15 minutes later, she was already calling the port, using personal contacts she had built up over the years. "Bill? It's Ellis from Osbury. Yes, I missed you too. Listen, I have a problem with container HLX 409. When Norton Parker, a tall man with graying temples and attentive gray eyes, walked in at 8:05, Ellis had already solved the delivery problem for Hewitt and was now talking to another client. She nodded to her boss and pointed to the coffee, continuing the conversation. "Yes, Mr. Phelps, we can review the terms of the contract. Of course, I understand your concerns. No, there will be no delays with transportation." Norton took the coffee with a grateful smile and disappeared into his office. By 8:30, when the office was full of employees, Ellis finished her conversation and entered Norton's office with a notepad. "Good morning," she said. "Hewitt Electronics is panicking about a container delay, but I've sorted it out. Also, Phelps Industries wants to renegotiate the delivery terms, and I promised a new proposal by the end of the week. Oh, and Takeshi from the Japanese branch called. Everything's fine there, but they want to expand their service line." Norton nodded, sipping his coffee. "You're a miracle, Ellis. What would I do without you? What are our plans for today?" At 10, we have a meeting with representatives from Nord Shipping. They want to discuss a possible partnership. At 2, we have a call with our European clients. At 4, Mr. Clayton is coming in about new software for the cargo tracking system. Norton nodded thoughtfully. "I can handle Nord Shipping myself. You just be there for the record. You can take the Europeans. You know their requirements better than I do. Let's go with Clayton together. I want to hear your opinion on the system." Ellis nodded, making notes. This division of responsibilities was business as usual. Everyone in the company knew that although Ellis was formally a secretary, she was actually in charge of key clients and made important decisions, often on her own. Norton Parker was 55 years old and had founded Osbury Shipping 20 years ago, starting with a single truck and an office the size of a storage room. Now his company served dozens of large and hundreds of small clients, organizing freight shipments across the East Coast and with access to international routes. He was a smart entrepreneur and a good manager, but his greatest talent was his ability to find the right people and trust them. "What's the latest on that new client, the pharmaceutical company?" he asked, looking through the documents on his desk. Medline? I spoke to their logistics manager yesterday. They're interested, but they're worried we won't be able to handle their volumes. I sent them a detailed proposal highlighting our experience with similar clients. Norton looked up and smiled. You're ahead of me again. Sometimes I think you should be the boss, not me. Ellis shook her head. You built this company, Mr. Parker. I'm just helping it run. Stop calling me Mr. Parker, will you? We've been working together for 6 years, and you're still being so formal. Old habits die hard, Ellis smiled. In fact, she remembered her first day at Osbury Shipping very well. A 19-year-old girl from a working-class family, she had been forced to drop out of college after her first year when her mother died and her father became seriously ill. In search of a job that could support them both, she had applied to almost every business in Osbury, but everywhere she went, they required either experience or education. Osbury Shipping was her last hope. Norton, who was short of an office assistant at the time, took her on a trial basis. Ellis worked like a woman possessed, quickly picking up the intricacies of the logistics business. Within 6 months, she was no longer just making coffee and answering phones. She was scheduling deliveries and communicating with customers. A year later, Norton entrusted her with several key accounts. Now, 6 years later, she was effectively the operations director, although she was still listed as a secretary on the books. Norton repeatedly offered her a formal promotion, but Ellis declined each time, partly out of modesty, partly because she enjoyed the freedom her current position gave her. No one expected her to take initiative or make independent decisions, which allowed her to exceed expectations and act flexibly. Besides, Norton paid her a salary that matched her actual contribution, not her position on the staffing chart, so there were no financial reasons to change her status either. Okay, I'll start preparing for the meeting with Nord Shipping, Ellis said, getting up. You'll need data on our route utilization for the last 2 quarters and a forecast for the next one. Exactly, Norton nodded. And add an analysis of their main customers. I need to understand if there will be any conflicts of interest. Returning to her desk, Ellis immersed herself in her work. Time flew by, and soon the representatives of Nord Shipping arrived, 3 stern men in business suits. Ellis led them into the conference room, where Norton was already waiting, and took her place at a small table in the corner, ready to take notes. The meeting proceeded as usual, exchanges of pleasantries, presentations, and discussions of potential cooperation. Ellis silently followed the conversation, noting important points for herself. Suddenly, one of the Nord representatives asked a question about international deliveries that Norton couldn't answer in detail. Actually, he said, Miss Marrow is in charge of that department. Ellis, could you explain our customs procedures to these gentlemen? All eyes turned to the young woman in the corner. None of the guests expected the secretary to suddenly join in a serious discussion. But Ellis, without the slightest embarrassment, calmly and professionally explained all the details of the company's international logistics, sprinkling in specific terms and figures that she knew by heart. After the meeting, when the guests had left, Norton approached Ellis. Did you see their faces when you started talking about customs certificates? He smiled. They were shocked. They were expecting to see a dumb girl who only knows how to write down her boss's orders. Ellis shrugged. That doesn't bother me anymore. Nothing really bothers you, Norton remarked. Sometimes I think you're too... calm? Ellis suggested. More reserved. You could ask for more, Ellis. You deserve recognition. I'm fine with everything, she replied simply. You recognize my value, and that's enough. The rest is just formalities. After lunch, Ellis held a video conference with European clients to discuss changes in EU legislation that could affect delivery times. She spoke confidently and competently, switching easily between business English and technical logistics jargon. None of her colleagues would have guessed that she was officially just a secretary. To them, she was a representative of Osbury Shipping with full decision-making authority. Towards evening, Mr. Clayton arrived at the office with a presentation of new software. Norton and Ellis listened to his proposal together, asking clarifying questions. When Clayton left, they remained alone in the conference room. What do you think? Norton asked, gathering his notes. The system is good, but expensive, Ellis replied. We don't need all the bells and whistles. I would suggest getting the basic version and only purchasing the modules for international shipping and container tracking. Norton nodded. That's what I thought. Put together a counteroffer for Clayton. They left the conference room and headed for their offices. The day was coming to an end, but Ellis knew she still had a dozen emails to answer and a plan to make for tomorrow. By the way, Norton said, stopping at the door of his office, did you remember that Vanessa is coming next month? Ellis looked at him in surprise. Your daughter? No, I didn't know. For long? She hasn't decided yet. She says she wants to take some time off and spend it at home. She hasn't been here in... I don't even know how long. 2 years for sure. Ellis nodded. She hardly knew Vanessa Parker, Norton's daughter. They had only met a couple of times when she came to visit her father. Mostly, Ellis had heard about her from her boss's occasional stories. Vanessa had graduated from a prestigious university, worked for a large corporation in another city, had a successful career, and seemed to have little interest in the family business. I'll prepare some information about our current projects for her if you'd like to bring her up to speed, Ellis offered. Oh, I don't think that's necessary. Norton waved his hand. She's coming to relax, not to work. Although, who knows? She's been asking questions about the company lately. Maybe she's finally interested. Ellis smiled. That would be nice. You always wanted her to join the business. Yes, Norton said thoughtfully. But I never pressured her. Everyone has to find their own way. He suddenly grimaced and rubbed his left arm. Are you all right? Ellis asked, noticing the gesture. Yes, just tired. Norton dismissed her. Long day. But a few minutes later, as Ellis sat at her desk writing a letter to Clayton, she heard a strange sound coming from her boss's office. Alarmed, she knocked on the door and, receiving no answer, entered. Norton was sitting in his chair, hunched over and clutching his chest. His face was pale and sweat beaded on his forehead. Norton! Ellis exclaimed, rushing to him. What's wrong? Nothing, just... He took a deep breath. Something's pressing on my chest. Ellis immediately grabbed the phone and dialed the emergency number. We need an ambulance to Main Street, 26, Osbury Shipping Building, she said clearly. A man, 55 years old, suspected heart attack. After finishing the call, she sat down next to Norton, holding his hand and checking his pulse. Hang in there, the ambulance is on its way. Breathe deeply, that's it, everything will be fine. Norton nodded weakly, his eyes filled with anxiety. Ellis, if anything happens, the company, nothing will happen, she said firmly. Now is not the time to think about that. After what seemed like an eternity, the sound of sirens could be heard. Ellis quickly went downstairs to meet the paramedics and show them to the office. The paramedics worked quickly and professionally. They hooked Norton up to a portable heart monitor, gave him oxygen, and quickly loaded him onto a stretcher. Preliminary diagnosis, acute coronary syndrome, one of the medics told Ellis. We're taking him to St. Mary's Hospital. I'm coming with you, Ellis said firmly. Are you a relative? No, but then you'd better come back later, the medic said curtly. We need to act quickly now. Ellis nodded, realizing there was no point in arguing. She leaned over Norton, who was already being wheeled to the ambulance. I'll call Vanessa. I'll be there as soon as I can. Norton squeezed her hand and nodded slightly before being taken away. Ellis stood at the entrance to the building, watching the ambulance drive away with its siren wailing. Then she took out her phone and dialed her boss's daughter's number. Vanessa Parker was nervous as she drove to St. Mary's Hospital. She had flown to Osbury on the first flight after Ellis Marrow's call, and now, looking out the taxi window at the familiar streets of the small town she had grown up in, she was trying to collect her thoughts. Just think, her father was in the hospital with a heart attack. The news had caught her at a corporate meeting in Boston, and Vanessa hadn't even had time to ask for time off properly. It's strange to be back, she thought. The last time Vanessa had been in Osbury was about 2 years ago, and that was only for the weekend. Now her whole routine had been turned upside down. Her prestigious job as an analyst at an investment company and her career plans were all pushed into the background overnight. The hospital greeted her with the smell of disinfectant and muffled voices. At the reception desk, Vanessa was directed to the cardiology ward on the 3rd floor. As she rode the elevator, she mentally prepared herself for the worst. However, the reality was not as bad as she had feared. Norton, although connected to monitors, looked relatively alert. Sitting next to him in a chair was a young woman with a tablet, Ellis Marrow, whom Vanessa remembered only vaguely. "Dad!" Vanessa exclaimed as she entered the room. "Vanessa!" Norton's face lit up at the sight of his daughter. He reached out his hand, and Vanessa squeezed it tightly, leaning down to kiss her father on the cheek. Ellis tactfully rose from her chair and stepped aside. "I was so scared when I got the call," Vanessa said. "How are you?" "Better than I look," Norton grinned. "The doctors say it was a warning." "It was a heart attack, Norton," Ellis interjected gently but firmly. "Don't downplay the seriousness of the situation." Vanessa looked at the young woman in surprise, who seemed completely at ease in the hospital room and talking to her boss. "Vanessa, do you remember Ellis?" Norton asked. "Of course." Vanessa nodded, although all she really remembered was that Ellis had worked as her father's secretary. "Thank you for calling me right away," Ellis nodded, and Vanessa noticed that there was a kind of appraising attentiveness in her gaze that was unusual for a subordinate meeting the relatives of her boss. "I'm glad you came," Ellis said. "Your father shouldn't be left alone, and the company needs leadership while he's recovering." "The company?" Vanessa asked. "But you have managers who can take over temporarily, don't you?" Norton and Ellis exchanged quick glances, which did not escape Vanessa's notice. "You see, Vanny," Norton began, "Osbury Shipping doesn't have the same strict hierarchy as large corporations. We only have 28 employees, and no one but me has the authority to make certain decisions." "I told your daughter about the current situation," Ellis interjected. "We have 2 major contracts in the process of being signed, and there are delivery issues with Hewitt Electronics." Vanessa felt irritated. Why was this secretary talking as if she knew all the details of the business? "We need to discuss this in more detail," Vanessa said, turning to her father. "I can take some time off from my company and temporarily take over while you're recovering." Norton's face lit up. "You'd do that for me? You know, I've always hoped you'd take an interest in the family business one day." "Of course, Dad. You mean more to me than anything?" Vanessa smiled and glanced quickly at Ellis, who kept a neutral expression, but whose eyes betrayed her doubts. "I'm sure I can handle everything. After all, I have an MBA and experience working in Boston." Was it her imagination, or did the corners of Ellis's lips twitch in a barely perceptible smirk? Their conversation was interrupted by the doctor, a tall man with a neat beard. "Mr. Parker, how are you feeling?" he asked, checking the monitors. "Fine, Dr. Fisher." "When can I be discharged?" The doctor shook his head. "Not so fast. The results show that you need surgery, stenting. You have a narrowed coronary artery, and we need to insert a stent to prevent another attack." "Surgery?" Vanessa asked anxiously. "How dangerous is it?" "It's a routine procedure these days," the doctor reassured him. "But after that, your father will need complete rest for at least 2 to 3 weeks. No stress, no work." Norton sighed. "What if I refuse?" "Then I can't guarantee that the next attack won't be fatal," Dr. Fisher replied seriously. A heavy silence hung in the room. Finally, Norton nodded. "All right, let's do the stenting. When?" "We have a slot in the operating room schedule tomorrow morning." "We'll start preparations tonight." After the doctor left, Norton looked thoughtfully at his daughter. "Looks like you'll really have to take over the company, at least for a couple of weeks." "Don't worry," Vanessa assured him. "I can handle it." "Ellis will fill you in," Norton said. "She knows everything about the company, even things I sometimes forget." Ellis nodded, and Vanessa caught herself thinking again that the secretary was acting too confident. "I think we should go to the office so you can show me what's going on," Vanessa said to Ellis. "Dad needs to rest before his operation." "Of course," agreed Ellis. "Norton, don't worry. I'll explain everything to Vanessa." "I'm not worried," smiled Norton. "You're both smart. You'll get along fine." As she said goodbye to her father, Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling that he was more concerned about how she and Ellis would get along than about his upcoming surgery. The Osbury shipping office was located in an old brick building in the city center. Vanessa looked around critically. It was small and provincial, nothing like the gleaming skyscrapers in downtown Boston where she was used to working. A lot has changed since your last visit, Ellis remarked, noticing the look on Vanessa's face. We've upgraded our tracking system and expanded our client base. But not the building, Vanessa muttered. Norton believes that clients value the quality of our services more than the appearance of our office, Ellis replied with a slight coolness. Inside, they were greeted by a plump, middle-aged woman. How's Norton? She asked Ellis immediately. Stable, Myra. The operation is tomorrow. This is Vanessa, Norton's daughter. She'll be taking over temporarily. Myra smiled warmly at Vanessa. Nice to meet you. I've heard a lot of good things about you from my father. The feeling is mutual, Vanessa replied politely, although she didn't remember her father ever mentioning Myra. Ellis led Vanessa through a small open space where several employees were working. Many of them nodded and smiled in greeting to the boss's daughter. Finally, they arrived at the reception area in front of Norton's office. This is my desk, Ellis said, pointing to a neatly organized workspace. And that's your father's office. I think you can use it while he's out. Vanessa nodded and entered her father's office. The spacious room with a large oak desk and numerous photographs on the walls exuded a sense of calm. In one of the pictures, Vanessa saw herself as a university graduate, holding her diploma, standing next to her father, who was smiling proudly. Where shall we start? She asked, sitting down in her father's chair. Ellis took a chair opposite her. I think we should start with an overview of current projects and key clients. I've prepared a folder with the basic information for you. She handed Vanessa a thick folder of documents. Vanessa glanced through the contents: contracts, client lists, financial reports. It looks a little confusing, she remarked. At my company, we use a special project management system. Everything is structured and accessible online. We have a digital system too, Ellis replied. But Norton prefers to have paper copies of important documents. Old school. I see, nodded Vanessa, although she actually considered this approach outdated. Tell me about your current problems. The main problem right now is with Hewitt Electronics, Ellis began. They're our biggest client. They manufacture electronic components and are very dependent on timely deliveries. We organize the entire logistics chain for them, from the port to their warehouse, and recently there have been complications due to new customs regulations. Vanessa listened carefully, mentally noting that Ellis sounded very knowledgeable for a secretary. She knew the specific terminology and seemed to be familiar with all the details of the business. Who oversees them? Vanessa asked. One of the account managers? Ellis hesitated for a second. Actually, I work with Hewitt personally. They prefer to communicate directly with Norton or me. With you? Vanessa asked incredulously. But you're a secretary, aren't you? Ellis looked her straight in the eye. Formally, yes, but in reality, my role in the company is broader. I'm responsible for several key clients and do strategic planning with Norton. She's not exactly modest, thought Vanessa. I see, she said aloud. Well, while I'm here, I'd like to establish a clearer structure. In large companies, it's standard practice for everyone to do their own job and not go beyond their job description. Ellis tilted her head slightly. Osbury Shipping is a small company with a flexible structure. That's one of our advantages. Customers appreciate that we can adapt quickly to their needs. Flexibility doesn't have to mean chaos, Vanessa objected. But let's get back to the specific issues. What about these new customs regulations? Over the next hour, Ellis gave a detailed account of all current projects and clients. Vanessa had to admit that the girl really knew her way around the business. However, this only increased her confusion. Why did a simple secretary have such influence in the company? After reviewing the cases, Vanessa decided to look at the financial documents. While looking through the payroll, she stumbled upon some unexpected information. Ellis Merrow was receiving a salary comparable to that of a top manager. Is this a mistake? Vanessa asked, pointing to the figure. Ellis calmly looked at the document. No, that's my salary. But that's almost as much as the senior managers earn, Vanessa exclaimed. Norton thinks my work is worth the money, Ellis replied simply. Vanessa frowned. Something wasn't right here. A secretary who was essentially performing the duties of an executive and getting paid accordingly? Tell me, Miss Merrow, how long have you been working for my father? 6 years, and you can just call me Ellis. And what is your education? Ellis tensed slightly. I attended Osbury College, but I didn't finish. Circumstances forced me to start working earlier. So that's what it is, thought Vanessa. No relevant education, just a father who is kind enough to overpay his employee. I see, she said aloud. Education plays a key role in modern business. I, for example, have an MBA from Harvard Business School and experience working at a leading investment company. I know, Ellis replied calmly. Norton is very proud of you. And rightly so, nodded Vanessa. I think my experience will help take Osbury Shipping to the next level. The company clearly needs to modernize and optimize its processes. She expected Ellis to support this idea, but she just smiled politely without showing much enthusiasm. We have steady growth and loyal customers, Ellis remarked. But, of course, there's always room for improvement. Vanessa felt irritated. Why was this secretary talking about the company as if she were a co-owner? I'd like to meet the key employees, Vanessa said, changing the subject. Please arrange a general meeting in an hour. Of course, Ellis nodded, standing up. Anything else? Yes, please bring me some coffee. Black, no sugar. It was a test. Vanessa wanted to see how Ellis would respond to a routine request appropriate for her position. Ellis paused for a moment, looking at Vanessa, and something flashed in her eyes. Perhaps surprise, but she just nodded. Okay, she said, and left the office. Alone, Vanessa sighed with relief. This Ellis was definitely a problem. Too confident, too knowledgeable for her position. Looking at her father's photo on the wall, Vanessa decided she would have to deal with this situation. She couldn't allow some uneducated secretary to have such influence over the family business. 10 minutes later, Ellis returned with a cup of coffee. The meeting is scheduled for 3 o'clock in the conference room, she said, placing the coffee on the desk. All key personnel have confirmed their attendance. Thank you, Vanessa nodded, sipping her coffee. To her surprise, it was made perfectly. Well, before the meeting, I'd like to look over some more documents. You can go about your business. It was a polite way of saying, leave me alone, and Ellis seemed to understand perfectly. Of course, she replied. I'll be at my desk if you need anything. After she left, Vanessa immersed herself in the papers. The more she read, the more she became convinced that her father's company was operating in an outdated manner. Paper documentation, obsolete processes, all of this could and should be changed. Vanessa prepared a short speech for the meeting and sketched out a plan for the most urgent changes. When she entered the conference room, about 10 people had already gathered there, department heads and key specialists. Ellis sat in the corner with a notepad. Good afternoon, everyone, Vanessa began. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vanessa Parker, Norton's daughter. Due to my father's illness, I will be temporarily taking over the management of the company. She glanced around at those present. Everyone looked at her with polite interest, but without much enthusiasm. First of all, I want to assure you that my father will be fine. He is scheduled for surgery tomorrow, and the doctors predict a full recovery. However, during his rehabilitation, which will take at least 2 to 3 weeks, he must not work or experience any stress. Vanessa paused, then continued in a more energetic tone. I have studied the state of affairs at the company and see great potential for optimization. I have experience working at a large investment company in Boston, and I am confident that I can apply modern business practices to improve the efficiency of Osbury Shipping. Several people exchanged glances, and Vanessa noticed skepticism in their eyes. This only strengthened her resolve. In the coming days, I will be meeting with each of you individually to better understand your roles and responsibilities. In the meantime, I've jotted down a few ideas for immediate implementation. She began to outline her plan. Transition to a fully electronic document management system, implement a new accounting system, optimize staffing, and review contracts with suppliers. With each point, the faces of those present became more and more tense. That evening, sitting in her father's empty office, Vanessa called the hospital to find out how he was doing. The nurse said that Norton was being prepared for surgery and was in stable condition, but he was unable to speak at the moment. Tell him I love him and I'll be there tomorrow, Vanessa said and hung up. She leaned back in her chair, feeling tired and uncertain. Her colleagues had not received her ideas with the enthusiasm she had expected. Ellis seemed to have much more influence in the company than a secretary should have, and her father's condition was worrying, despite the doctor's assurances. Vanessa glanced at the clock. It was late, time to return to her father's house where she was staying. But before leaving, she decided to look through the payroll documents again. Something about them bothered her. Opening the folder she wanted, Vanessa carefully studied the statements for the last few months. The more she read, the more she frowned. Ellis Marrow, listed in the documents as a simple secretary, was receiving a salary on par with that of a customer service director. It was illogical and inefficient from a business standpoint. Well, thought Vanessa, closing the folder, it looks like I'll have to start optimizing the staff, and Miss Ellis Marrow will be first on the list. Vanessa Parker sat at her desk in her father's office, reviewing the company's performance reports for the last quarter. It had been a week since she arrived in Osbury. Norton's operation had been successful, and he was now recovering in the hospital, planning to rehabilitate at home. The doctors were strict in their orders: no stress, no work for at least 3 weeks. This gave Vanessa enough time to implement the changes she had in mind. She put the reports aside and leaned back in her chair. The numbers weren't impressive. Osbury Shipping was showing steady but very slow growth. By the standards of the big business Vanessa was used to in Boston, it was almost stagnation. Sure, the company was profitable, but its potential was clearly not being fully utilized. "Miss Parker, may I come in?" Ellis peeked in the door. "Of course." Vanessa nodded, gathering the papers scattered across her desk. Ellis entered with a tablet in her hands. "I've prepared the materials for the meeting with Medline. They're a new potential client, a pharmaceutical company I told you about. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 in the morning." "Oh, yes." Vanessa took the folder offered to her. "But I thought Harold Dawson was going to lead that meeting. He's the head of logistics, isn't he? Norton usually handles negotiations with new major clients, sometimes with me," Ellis explained. "Mr. Dawson is responsible for existing contracts and their technical implementation." Vanessa frowned. Again, this strange division of responsibilities where the secretary negotiates with important clients. "In that case, I'll conduct the meeting myself," she said decisively. "And you prepare an extended presentation on our capabilities for me. I think we should emphasize international transportation, since Medline imports components, right?" "Yes, but I don't think international logistics is what interests them most," Ellis said cautiously. "In preliminary negotiations, they were more interested in our ability to maintain strict temperature control and safety during domestic transportation. It's pharmaceuticals. They have special requirements." Vanessa felt irritated. Again, this girl was trying to tell her what to do. "Thanks for the information. I'll take it into account," she said dryly. "But please prepare the presentation according to my instructions. I want to show Medline all the company's capabilities, not just what they asked for. It's standard sales practice to offer the customer more than they expect." Ellis hesitated, as if about to object, but then simply nodded. "Okay, I'll have it ready by this evening." "And one more thing," added Vanessa, looking through her notes. "I want to implement a new reporting system for all employees. At the end of each workday, everyone should send a brief report on the work they've done. That way we can track performance and optimize work processes." "Daily reports?" Ellis asked. "But we're a small company, and many employees are often on the road. Drivers, for example." "We'll make an exception for field staff," Vanessa cut her off, "but office staff must report. How can I manage effectively if I don't know who's doing what?" "Norton always said he knew what his people were doing because he simply talked to them," Ellis remarked quietly. "Everyone has their own management style, Miss Marrow," Vanessa replied coldly. "Please prepare a template for daily reports and send it to all employees, starting today." Ellis nodded again and left the office. Vanessa noticed how her back tensed as she closed the door. Not used to real discipline, thought Vanessa. Never mind, soon everyone here will learn to work really efficiently. The rest of the day was spent in meetings and developing a plan to optimize the company. Vanessa organized meetings with the heads of all departments to discuss possible improvements. To her surprise, Many of them were quite conservative and wary of the proposed changes. "We're used to responding flexibly to customer requests," explained Harold Dawson, a gray-haired man who had been head of the logistics department for 15 years. "Standardizing processes could take away that advantage. Or, conversely, it could make us more predictable and reliable for our customers," Vanessa countered. "In today's business world, stability and transparency of processes are highly valued. Maybe in financial corporations," Dawson shrugged, "but our customers often value the fact that we can adapt to their changing needs, rather than forcing them to adapt to our procedures." By the end of the day, Vanessa felt exhausted. It seemed that everyone in the company was satisfied with the status quo, and no one was eager to develop and grow. "They're too used to the comfort of a small family business," she thought. "They don't understand the potential." That evening, she visited her father in the hospital. Norton looked better, although he was still weak after the operation. "How's the company?" he asked when they were alone in the room. "Everything's under control, Dad," Vanessa replied confidently. "I've already started implementing some improvements. I think you'll see results soon." "What improvements?" Norton asked, and Vanessa detected a note of concern in his voice. "Nothing radical," she hastened to reassure him. "Just a clearer reporting structure, standardization of processes, and cost optimization." "I hope you're consulting with Ellis on these matters?" Norton asked. "She knows the company like no one else." Vanessa suppressed her irritation. "Ellis again." "Of course, Dad," she lied. "We work very well together." Norton visibly relaxed at her words. "That's good. I always knew you two would get along. You're both smart, ambitious." Vanessa nodded, holding back uninvited comments. How could her father put her, with her education and experience working for major companies, on the same level as some provincial secretary without a degree? The next morning, Vanessa arrived at the office early to prepare for the meeting with Medline representatives. To her surprise, Ellis was already there, setting up the conference room. "Good morning," she said. "I've prepared the presentation as you requested, with an emphasis on international transportation. But I've also included information about our capabilities for providing special conditions for the transportation of medicines." Vanessa looked through the presentation on her tablet. Ellis had indeed struck the right balance. The main part was devoted to what Vanessa wanted to show, but there were also slides responding to specific customer requests. "Not bad," Vanessa acknowledged. "Did you prepare information about the Medline representatives? Who will be there on their side?" "3 people are expected," Ellis replied. "The logistics director, the technical director, and a financial consultant. I've put together some brief profiles on each of them." She handed Vanessa a folder with printouts. The information was detailed and well-structured. Each guest's education, work experience, interests, and preferences. "She's good at her job," Vanessa reluctantly admitted to herself. "But she's still meddling in things that aren't her business." The meeting began promptly at 10. The Medline representatives turned out to be serious, business-like people who knew exactly what they wanted. Vanessa gave her presentation confidently, trying to impress and showcase all the capabilities of Osbury Shipping. However, she quickly noticed that the guests lost interest when she talked about international transportation and perked up when she mentioned specialized temperature-controlled transport for medicines. After the presentation, the question-and-answer session began, and then Vanessa realized that she was not prepared for the technical details. "What temperature can you guarantee when transporting Category A drugs?" asked Medline's technical director, a thin man with thin-rimmed glasses. Vanessa hesitated. She did not know the exact technical specifications of the equipment. "Our refrigerators provide a full range of temperature settings," she began vaguely, "from -20 to +25 degrees, with an accuracy of plus or minus 0.5 of a degree." Ellis interjected, sitting off to the side with a tablet for taking notes. "For particularly sensitive preparations, we can use special thermally insulated containers that maintain the temperature for up to 72 hours, even when the power is turned off." The technical director nodded with satisfaction, making notes. "And what are your statistics on delivery times in emergencies?" asked the logistics director. Once again, Ellis answered before Vanessa could formulate a response. See, for emergency deliveries within a radius of 100 kilometers, we guarantee a delivery time of no more than 3 hours in 95% of cases. For longer routes, we have partnership agreements with airlines for urgent transportation. Vanessa felt her irritation growing. Ellis had effectively taken the initiative away from her at the meeting, and worst of all, the Medline representatives were now addressing their questions directly to her, ignoring Vanessa. After the meeting ended and the guests had left, Vanessa turned sharply to Ellis. "What was that?" "Excuse me?" Ellis looked genuinely surprised. "You interrupted me and answered questions that were directed at me," Vanessa said through clenched teeth. "This was my meeting and I should have been leading it." "I was just adding technical details that you might not have known," Ellis replied calmly. "The clients got the information they needed, and I think the meeting went well." "It's not about the result. It's about subordination," Vanessa snapped. "In the future, if you attend my meetings, don't interfere unless you're asked." Ellis held her gaze, then nodded. "As you say, Miss Parker." Vanessa seethed with anger for a while, but gradually calmed down. After all, the meeting had gone well, and the Medline representatives seemed interested. Perhaps the secretary really wanted to help, not undermine her authority. Over the next few days, Vanessa actively implemented her ideas for optimizing the company. She drew up a new staffing schedule, revised job descriptions, and developed a new reporting structure. According to her plan, the company was to become more hierarchical and structured, with a clear division of responsibilities. She paid particular attention to Ellis's position. Under the new scheme, the director's secretary was to be responsible exclusively for administrative support, with no authority to deal with clients. These functions were transferred to a specially created customer service department. When the new organizational structure was ready, Vanessa called a general staff meeting to present her plan for change. "Starting today," she announced, standing in front of the team in the conference room, "we are starting to work in a new way. Each department will receive clear instructions about its functions and responsibilities. This will allow us to avoid duplication of work and increase our efficiency." She pointed to the new organizational structure on the screen, explaining the functions of each department. When she got to the secretary position, Vanessa noticed Ellis, who was sitting in the corner of the conference room, straighten up slightly. "The duties of the executive secretary will be limited to administrative support," Vanessa announced. "Client work will be transferred entirely to a new department headed by Thomas Bryant." Thomas, a young, ambitious manager whom Vanessa had singled out during the week as a potentially useful ally, nodded with a satisfied smile. The other employees looked at each other in confusion. "Miss Parker," Harold Dawson raised his hand, "many of our clients are used to working directly with Ellis. They trust her and value her experience. I don't think a sudden change in contact person will be good for our relationships." "Business is no place for habits and sentiment, Mr. Dawson," Vanessa replied firmly. "Clients should work with the company, not with individual employees. Otherwise, we create the risk of losing clients when an employee leaves." "But Ellis isn't planning on leaving," Dawson objected. "And she has been acting as customer service director for several years, just without a formal title." "Just because it's been the practice for a long time doesn't mean it's the best way to do things," Vanessa retorted. "In an efficient company, everyone should do their job. Secretaries handle administrative matters. Sales managers handle sales." A tense silence hung in the room. Vanessa felt she hadn't convinced the audience, but it didn't matter. She had the authority to make decisions, and she had already made up her mind. "Any more questions?" she asked. "If not, please return to work. Mr. Bryant, please stay behind to discuss the details." The employees reluctantly dispersed. Ellis remained in her seat, her expression unreadable. In the afternoon, Vanessa noticed that the office was unusually quiet. Employees avoided eye contact with her and spoke only when necessary. "It's a normal reaction to change," she thought. "They'll get used to it soon." In the evening, when most of the employees had already left, there was a knock on Vanessa's door. "Come in," she said. The door opened and Ellis appeared on the threshold. "Miss Parker, can I talk to you?" "Of course," Vanessa nodded, putting down her documents. "What's the matter?" Ellis entered and closed the door behind her. "I wanted to discuss your changes to the company structure," she said calmly. "I'm listening," replied Vanessa, preparing for objections. I understand your desire to optimize the company's operations, Ellis began, but I'm afraid that some of the changes could damage our relationships with our clients, especially with key ones like Hewitt Electronics and Phelps Industries. We already discussed this at the meeting, Vanessa said impatiently. Clients need to work with the company, not with individual employees. In theory, yes, Ellis agreed. But in practice, business is built on personal relationships. For example, Mr. Hewitt has never trusted anyone but Norton and me. We've spent 6 years building that relationship. If Thomas, who doesn't even know the specifics of their business, becomes his contact now— Thomas will learn quickly, Vanessa interrupted. He's a capable manager. It's not about ability, it's about trust, Ellis insisted. Mr. Hewitt is a very conservative man. He's suspicious of new people. When he finds out that I won't be handling his account anymore, he'll get used to the idea. Vanessa interrupted again, feeling her irritation growing. Clients come to us for our services, not to socialize with specific employees. Ellis took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. Miss Parker, I've been with this company for 6 years. I know every client, every contract, every detail of our business. I don't want to sound presumptuous, but many clients stay with us because of the relationships we've built. If you suddenly change the way we work with them— Enough! Vanessa said sharply, standing up. I'm not going to listen to lectures from a secretary. I have an MBA from Harvard and worked for a Fortune 500 company. I know how to run a business. Ellis also stood up, her face remaining calm, but her eyes expressing determination. I understand that you have an excellent education and experience, she said evenly. But Osbury Shipping is not a Fortune 500 company. We have our own specific needs, our own clients, our own methods of working that have proven effective over the years. Working methods where a secretary with no college degree gets a top manager's salary and interferes in the running of the company? Vanessa no longer hid her anger. That's inefficient and unprofessional. Ellis froze for a moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. I never claimed a position I didn't deserve, she said quietly. Norton himself determined my role and my compensation based on my actual contribution to the company. Oh, I'm sure you know how to be useful, Vanessa remarked sarcastically, suddenly switching to the informal you. But your time is up. Starting today, you're either doing the duties of a regular secretary, or you can look for another job. At that moment, the office door opened and Harold Dawson appeared in the doorway with some papers in his hand. Seeing the tense scene, he froze. Excuse me, am I interrupting? No, Mr. Dawson, you're just in time, said Vanessa, without taking her eyes off Ellis. Miss Marrow was just explaining to me why my management strategy is wrong, and how she, with her unfinished education, knows better than I do how to run a business. Dawson shifted awkwardly from foot to foot, clearly not wanting to witness this conflict. I'm just trying to warn you about the risks, Ellis replied calmly. As someone who knows this business from the inside. You're just a secretary, Vanessa shouted, finally losing control. You're a nobody. Don't you dare tell me how to run my family's business. A dead silence hung in the office. Dawson looked shocked. Ellis stood motionless, only her eyes slightly widened in surprise. Then she slowly, with dignity, straightened up. You're right, she said quietly. I'm just a secretary. And in that case, I have no business being here. What do you mean? Asked Vanessa, still boiling with anger. It means I quit, Ellis replied simply. Vanessa hadn't expected this turn of events. She thought Ellis would beg, make excuses, maybe even cry. But not this calm, dignified acceptance of the situation. Fine, she said finally. Human Resources will prepare all the necessary paperwork. That won't be necessary, Ellis replied. I have an open-ended contract with the right to terminate at my own discretion without notice. I'll sign a resignation letter right now. She took a sheet of paper from Vanessa's desk and quickly wrote a short statement, then signed it and placed it in front of Vanessa. That's it, Ellis said. I'll pack my things and leave today. Vanessa was stunned by her decisiveness, but she didn't let it show. As you wish, she said coldly. Ellis turned to leave but stopped at the door and looked back at Vanessa. You know, she said quietly with a slight smile, I could say a lot right now, about who I really was to this company, about what will happen when I leave, but no problem, I'll just go. With that, she left the office, leaving Vanessa and a stunned Dawson alone. The first morning without Ellis began with an unpleasant surprise for Vanessa. She arrived at the office at 8:30 and discovered that her usual cup of coffee, which Ellis had always brought her, was not on her desk. It was a small thing, but it immediately reminded her of the conflict that had occurred the day before. Vanessa scolded herself inwardly. I don't need to miss that stuck-up secretary. She entered the reception area and found that Ellis's desk was empty. No computer, no personal belongings, just a neat stack of folders labeled Current Affairs. Next to it was a flash drive labeled Client Contacts and Monthly Calendar. Miss Parker, a voice behind her said, can I have a word with you? Vanessa turned around and saw Harold Dawson, yesterday's unwitting witness to her argument with Ellis. Of course, Mr. Dawson, she nodded. Is it urgent? He glanced around as if not wanting anyone to overhear them. It's about Ellis. Are you sure firing her was the right decision? Vanessa felt irritation rising inside her. Did everyone in this company think she was incapable of making her own decisions? Absolutely sure, she snapped. The company can't depend on one person, especially a secretary. We'll find a replacement, and everything will run smoothly and more efficiently. Dawson shook his head. It's not about the position, Miss Parker. It's about who she really was to us. Ellis knew all the processes, all the contacts, all the nuances in customer relations. And she left all the necessary information. Vanessa pointed to the folders and flash drive. We'll manage. Dawson looked unconvinced, but didn't argue. By the way, he added, we had a call scheduled with Hewitt Electronics for 10 o'clock today. Ellis usually handled these weekly calls. Who would be talking to them today? Vanessa thought for a moment. Hewitt was one of the company's largest clients, and damaging their relationship would be an unforgivable mistake. I'll take the call, she decided, and starting next week, I'll pass them on to the new account manager, Thomas Bryant. Dawson shook his head again but said nothing and left, leaving Vanessa alone with her thoughts. By 10 o'clock, Vanessa had reviewed the history of interactions with Hewitt Electronics. The company manufactured electronic components and particularly valued accuracy and timely delivery. Ellis kept detailed records of every contact, and Vanessa was able to get an idea of the specifics of working with this client. At exactly 10 o'clock, the phone rang. Vanessa turned on the speakerphone and introduced herself. Vanessa Parker, interim manager at Osbury Shipping. Good morning, Mr. Hewitt. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Good morning, a low male voice finally replied. Where's Ellis? We always discuss the weekly report with her. Vanessa braced herself for an unpleasant conversation. Miss Marrow no longer works for us. I'm Norton Parker's daughter, and I'm running the company while my father recovers from surgery. I'll be personally overseeing your account and guaranteeing that the quality of service remains the same. Another pause, this time longer. What do you mean, no longer working with you? Hewitt's voice sounded puzzled. Ellis is practically Osbury Shipping to us. She knows all our needs, all the ins and outs of our business. I understand your concern, Vanessa tried to reassure him, but I assure you that we have retained all the information and will continue to provide the highest level of service. Now, if you don't mind, shall we move on to the weekly report? Vanessa opened the report file she found in the Hewitt Electronics folder, but before she could start, Hewitt interrupted her. I'm sorry, Miss Parker, but I need to think about this. I'll be in touch later. And he hung up, leaving Vanessa confused. She had expected questions, even discontent, but not such open disregard. Throughout the day, the situation only got worse. 2 more clients canceled their scheduled calls after learning of Ellis's departure. By evening, Vanessa received an email from Phelps Industries, her second-largest client, demanding an explanation and confirmation that all terms of their contract would be honored in full. What nonsense, Vanessa muttered as she read the email. Do they really think that one employee leaving can affect the fulfillment of our contractual obligations? She composed a confident and professional response. explaining that the company was undergoing a reorganization to improve efficiency and that all contract terms would be strictly adhered to. The next morning, the situation became even more tense. Vanessa discovered that some important documents that Ellis was supposed to prepare before her departure were missing. She called Thomas Bryant, whom she had appointed as the new Director of Customer Relations. "Thomas, I need you to contact Hewitt Electronics immediately and confirm their delivery schedule for next week, and find the documentation for the Medline contract. They need to respond to our proposal by the end of the week." Bryant, a young, ambitious manager, looked a little confused. "I'll try, Miss Parker, but I don't have all the contacts." Ellis always communicated directly with key people at these companies, and not everything was documented. "Use the official contacts on their websites," Vanessa said firmly. "In large companies, there should be no ties to specific people. It's unprofessional." Bryant nodded and left, but Vanessa noticed the uncertainty in his eyes. By lunchtime, it became clear that the problems were not limited to communication with clients. The shipment tracking system had started malfunctioning, and no one could figure out what was wrong. Ellis was working on integrating the new software, the technician explained when Vanessa demanded an explanation. She wrote several scripts for automation, but didn't have time to document everything before she left. "Are you saying we're dependent on some homemade solutions from one employee?" Vanessa exclaimed. "That's unprofessional. Why weren't standard solutions used?" "Because standard solutions are 3 times more expensive and not as flexible for our needs," the technician shrugged. Ellis found a cost-effective and efficient way to solve the problem. Vanessa rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming on. She hadn't expected the absence of one person to cause so many problems. By the end of the 3rd day after Ellis left, the situation had become critical. Hewitt Electronics sent an official notice of possible contract termination if service quality did not return to its previous level. 2 small clients had already severed ties without waiting for improvements. The shipment tracking system was still malfunctioning, causing dissatisfaction among all clients without exception. Vanessa tried to tighten control by requiring more detailed daily reports from employees and increasing the number of meetings to resolve issues. But this only made the situation worse. People spent more time on reports than on actual work. On the 4th day, Vanessa decided to take drastic action. She gathered all department heads for an emergency meeting. "This situation is unacceptable," she said, looking around at everyone with a stern gaze. "We are losing customers because we are unable to adapt to the absence of one employee. This indicates serious structural problems within the company." Harold Dawson, who had been staring gloomily at his desk throughout the conversation, looked up. "Miss Parker, with all due respect, the problem is not structural. The problem is that you fired someone who was informally serving as your operations director, customer service director, and technical consultant all rolled into one. Ellis was effectively your father's right-hand man, and everyone knew it except you." "That's ridiculous," Vanessa retorted. "How could a secretary with no college degree perform so many critical functions?" "Formal education and real-world skills are 2 different things," Dawson replied calmly. "Ellis grew up with the company for 6 years. She knew all the processes inside out, all the nuances of the relationships with each client. Your father valued her for a reason." The other executives nodded silently in agreement with Dawson. Vanessa felt despair wash over her. Had she really misjudged the situation so badly? "All right," she finally said. "Let's say you're right. What do you suggest? Bring Ellis back? Humble ourselves and ask her to return after she's already left?" "That would be the most effective solution," Dawson nodded. "But I'm not sure she'll agree. Ellis is a proud woman." "In that case, we have to find another way," Vanessa said decisively. "Thomas, you and your team need to contact all of our key clients as soon as possible. Reassure them that we are working through some temporary difficulties and that everything will stabilize soon." The meeting ended, but Vanessa wasn't sure the situation could be quickly remedied. She keenly felt the distrust of her employees and their hidden resistance to her management methods. That evening, while reviewing the financial reports, Vanessa was horrified to discover that the company had lost about 30% of its customers in 4 days. If this continued, the figure could rise to 80 by the end of the week. It was a disaster. She considered calling her father but quickly dismissed the idea. Norton was still recovering from surgery, and news of the company's problems could cause him dangerous stress. No, she had to handle this herself. In a moment of desperation, Vanessa decided to call Ellis. Perhaps her former secretary would agree to consult with them for a fee. But when she opened her phone contacts, she realized she didn't have Ellis's number. It should have been in the company database, but the contact management system had also been malfunctioning since Ellis left. "Damn it," Vanessa muttered, realizing the irony of the situation. The next day, she came to the office determined to stop the bleeding. She personally called several key clients, including Hewitt Electronics and Phelps Industries, offering to meet with them to discuss their concerns. To her surprise, Gerald Hewitt declined the meeting. "Miss Parker, I respect you and your father," he said on the phone, "but we've already made our decision. Our business is critically dependent on a stable supply, and Osbury Shipping cannot guarantee that at this time." "Mr. Hewitt, we're working through some temporary difficulties," Vanessa assured him. "Give us another week and everything will be fine." "I'm sorry, but we can't take that risk," Hewitt replied firmly. "By the way, we've already found an alternative solution for our logistics needs." "Another company?" Vanessa asked in a fallen voice. "Let's just say we'll continue working with someone we trust," Hewitt replied evasively. "All the best, Miss Parker." After that conversation, Vanessa did a little digging and was shocked to discover that several former clients of Osbury Shipping had already signed contracts with a new logistics consulting firm that appeared to have started operating just days ago, and the founder of that firm was Ellis Marrow. "It can't be," Vanessa whispered, looking at the newly created website for Marrow Logistics. How did she manage to set up a company so quickly? The answer came the next day when an official letter from Hewitt Electronics arrived at the Osbury Shipping office terminating the contract. The letter stated that the company would continue to work with Ellis Marrow, who had provided impeccable service for many years. Vanessa was stunned, so the clients were loyal not to the company, but to a specific person? This contradicted all the business theories she had studied at Harvard. By the end of the week, her worst fears were confirmed. Osbury Shipping had lost 80% of its clients. Most of them had switched to Ellis's new firm. The company's turnover had fallen dramatically, and if this continued, they would soon be operating at a loss. Sitting in her office late on Friday evening, Vanessa tried to understand how it had all gone so wrong. She had followed the book, implemented proven management techniques, and strived for optimization and efficiency. Why had the result been the exact opposite of what she had expected? Her thoughts were interrupted by a quiet knock on the door. It was Harold Dawson. "Miss Parker, you're still here," he said as he entered the office. "I thought you had already left." "As you can see, I'm not," Vanessa replied wearily. "I'm trying to figure out how to save the company from total collapse." Dawson sighed and sat down across from her. "You know, I've been working here for 15 years, he began. "I've seen it grow from a small firm with one truck to a respected player in regional logistics. And you know what has always set Osbury Shipping apart from its competitors?" "What is it?" asked Vanessa, ready to hear any advice. "Personal relationships," Dawson replied simply. "Your father always said that trust is the most important thing in our business. Customers need to be confident that we won't let them down, that we understand their needs, that we'll do the impossible in a critical situation." And Ellis embodied that approach. She knew all the customers personally, remembered their children's birthdays, their preferences, their fears. She didn't just organize deliveries, she built relationships. Vanessa was silent, processing what she had heard. It was so different from what she had been taught in business school. There, it was all about processes, systems, optimization. The human factor was seen more as a variable to be standardized rather than a key asset. "So what now?" she finally asked. "Ellis took our clients. That's almost industrial espionage." Dawson shook his head. "No, Miss Parker. Ellis didn't steal clients. They chose her because they trust her, and technically, she didn't violate any non-compete agreements because she never signed any. She was just a secretary, remember?" Those words hit Vanessa hard. Her own dismissive attitude toward Ellis had come back to haunt her. "What am I going to do?" Her voice was filled with despair. "How am I going to explain to my father that I destroyed his business in 1 week?" Dawson stood up and headed for the door. "Maybe you should start by admitting your mistake," he said. "And maybe try talking to Ellis. She's not a bad person. I'm sure she didn't mean to ruin the company. She just used her skills and connections to build something of her own after she was humiliated and fired." When Dawson left, Vanessa sat in the silence of the empty office for a long time. Then she picked up the phone and dialed the hospital number. She had to talk to her father, no matter how hard it was. Meanwhile, in a small office on the other side of Osbury, Ellis Marrow was finishing her workday. Her new company, Marrow Logistics, was still virtual. She had no office, no employees, just herself, her laptop, and her smartphone. But she had knowledge, experience, and most importantly, the trust of her clients. Ellis had no plans to take clients away from Osbury Shipping. When she left, all she could think about was how to maintain her dignity in the face of humiliation. But the very next day, Gerald Hewitt called her. Somehow he had found out about her dismissal. "Ellis, what's going on?" he asked. "Some stuck-up girl called me, introducing herself as Norton's daughter. She said she'd be handling our account now. Is that true?" "Unfortunately, yes," Ellis replied. "I no longer work for Osbury Shipping." "What are you going to do?" Hewitt asked. "I haven't decided yet," Ellis admitted honestly. "Why don't you start your own consulting firm?" Hewitt suggested unexpectedly. "I know that other companies handle the technical details of shipping, but coordination, planning, and problem-solving are what you're good at. We'd be your first clients." The idea seemed crazy, but the more Ellis thought about it, the more appealing it became. In her 6 years at Osbury Shipping, she had gained enough knowledge and contacts to start her own business. She had savings that she had set aside from her impressive salary. Most importantly, she had the support of people who valued her professionalism. Norton Parker returned home from the hospital 3 weeks after his surgery. He was greeted by Vanessa, who was nervously pacing back and forth in the hallway of their family home on the outskirts of Osbury. Despite his pallor and obvious exhaustion, Norton looked much better than he had on the day the ambulance took him away. "Finally home," he breathed with relief, sinking into his favorite armchair in the living room. "The doctors say the recovery is going well, but I'll have to take it easy and avoid stress for a few more weeks." Vanessa nodded, hesitating to bring up the company's affairs. For the past 2 weeks, she had avoided detailed conversations with her father, responding with general phrases such as, "Everything is under control," and "There are some minor complications, but nothing serious." Norton trusted his daughter and didn't press her for details, knowing that the doctors had told him not to worry. But now that he was back home, it was impossible to hide the truth any longer. "How are things at the office?" Norton asked, taking a cup of herbal tea from his daughter's hands. "I miss work." "Dad." Vanessa sat down on the sofa opposite him, clenching her hands so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "We need to talk seriously." Norton immediately tensed up when he saw the look on his daughter's face. "Something happened? Problems with clients?" Vanessa took a deep breath and began to tell him about how she had tried to optimize the company's operations by implementing new processes and structures. She told him about the conflict with Ellis and her subsequent dismissal. She told him how this had been followed by a mass exodus of clients. She spoke quickly and incoherently, trying to explain her reasoning and why she believed her decisions were correct. With each word she uttered, Norton's face grew darker. When she finished, an oppressive silence hung in the room. "How many?" he finally asked in a hollow voice. "How many what?" Vanessa didn't understand. "How many customers have we lost?" Vanessa lowered her eyes. "About 80%. Practically all of our key contracts." Norton closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair as if trying to cope with sudden pain. "Oh, what have you done?" he said, his voice filled with rage and despair. "What the hell have you done to my company?" "Dad, I tried to do my best," Vanessa protested heatedly. "I used everything I learned in business school, all the modern management techniques. And you didn't bother to understand the essence of the business you took on to manage," Norton interrupted, raising his voice against medical advice. "You didn't try to figure out how the company really works, who actually performs the key functions." "I tried," Vanessa shouted back, But how could I have guessed that everything was being held together by a single self-assured secretary? This is not normal, Dad. This is not how a healthy business should operate. Enough! Norton slammed his fist on the armrest of his chair, silencing Vanessa. How arrogant and blind are you that you couldn't see the obvious? Ellis Marrow was never just a secretary. She was the brain center of the entire company's operations. Norton stood up and began to pace slowly around the room, clearly trying to calm himself. When Ellis came to me 6 years ago, she was a 19-year-old girl with no experience, but with incredible potential and a strong work ethic. He began in a calmer tone. She did start out as a secretary, but she quickly showed that she was capable of more. Within a year, she was negotiating with clients. 2 years later, she was solving complex logistical problems that stumped even experienced managers. She absorbed knowledge like a sponge and had an innate talent for building relationships. Vanessa listened without interrupting, tears welling up in her eyes as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. I offered her a formal promotion several times, Norton continued, Director of Client Services, Director of Operations, even a partnership. But Ellis always refused. She liked the freedom that her informal role gave her. Clients didn't expect a secretary to have a deep understanding of logistics or finance, and that allowed her to surprise them with her competence and build trusting relationships without the pressure of an official title. But that doesn't make sense, Vanessa said quietly. Why stay in the shadows when you're actually running the show? Not everyone craves titles and recognition, Vanny. Norton sighed. Ellis valued freedom of action and real influence more. Besides, she had personal reasons. Her father is seriously ill and requires constant care. An official high-ranking position would mean more responsibility and more time at work. He sank back into his chair, as if this confession had drained him of his last ounce of strength. I always thought that since we paid her a fair salary and gave her the opportunity to fulfill her potential, everything was fine. We weren't deceiving anyone. Ellis was happy with her position, but I never thought that her informal status could become a problem. If she was so important, why didn't you explain that to me from the start? Vanessa asked. Norton smiled sadly. I tried. Remember I said that Ellis knows everything about the company, even things I sometimes forget? I hoped you would work together and see her value for yourself. I didn't want to impose my opinion on you. I wanted you to form your own. But apparently, prejudice and pride prevented you from seeing the obvious. There was no malice in her father's words, only endless fatigue and disappointment, and that made Vanessa feel even worse. What now? She asked quietly. The company is almost ruined. Most of the clients have gone to Ellis's new firm. She started her own company? Norton looked surprised, but not upset. She got her bearings quickly. You're not angry with her? Vanessa asked in amazement. She stole our clients. No, I'm not angry. Norton shook his head. Clients choose who they want to work with. If they preferred Ellis, then she was clearly more valuable to them than the Osbury shipping brand, and I can't blame her for using her skills and contacts to survive after she was fired. He paused, then added, Besides, it's my fault for allowing a situation to develop where one person could take the soul of the company with them. I relied too much on Ellis and didn't create a reliable system. That's my mistake as a leader. Vanessa didn't know what to say. She had expected anger, accusations, but not this calm acceptance of the situation. What can we do? She finally asked. Is there any way to save the company? Norton thought for a moment. Maybe. We still have some clients, our main assets, our reputation, but we'll have to start from scratch. The first step is to talk to Ellis. Do you think she'll come back? Vanessa asked doubtfully. I don't think so, Norton replied honestly. But maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone. You need to meet with her and try to establish contact. Just don't be arrogant or prejudiced, Vanny. Listen and try to understand. Me? Vanessa looked frightened. But she hates me. Then you'll have to try very hard, Norton said firmly. You destroyed what I've been building for 20 years. Now it's your turn to try to fix it. The next morning, Vanessa stood in front of the door of a small office that Ellis had rented for her new company. Marrow Logistics, read the modest sign on the door. Gathering her courage, Vanessa knocked. "Come in," said a familiar voice. Ellis was sitting at her computer in the small but cozy room. When she saw Vanessa, she showed no surprise or hostility, only a slight raise of an eyebrow. "Miss Parker, I didn't expect to see you here." "Hello, Ellis," Vanessa began uncertainly. "Can we talk?" Ellis gestured to a chair across from her. "Of course. Have a seat." Vanessa sat down, nervously adjusting her hair. Now that she was face to face with the woman she had so unfairly judged, all the words she had prepared flew out of her head. I came to apologize," she finally blurted out. "I was wrong. About everything." Ellis looked at her intently, saying nothing. "I didn't understand your role in the company," Vanessa continued. "I couldn't see beyond the title on your contract. It was stupid and short-sighted of me." "Yes, it was," Ellis agreed calmly. "But I accept your apology. Anything else?" Ellis's directness and calmness threw Vanessa off balance. She had expected resistance, maybe even malice, but not this confident restraint. "My father is back from the hospital," Vanessa said. He's in shock over what happened to the company. We've lost almost all of our clients." "I know," Ellis nodded. "How is he feeling?" "Physically, he's better. The doctors say he's recovering well, but emotionally, he's devastated by what happened to his life's work." Ellis frowned, and for the first time Vanessa saw emotion in her eyes, genuine concern for Norton. "I didn't want this," Ellis said quietly. "I didn't plan to take clients. They just started calling me one after another when they found out I was leaving." "I understand," Vanessa nodded. "And I don't blame you. You had every right to use your skills and contacts. I forced you to leave." There was a pause. The two women looked at each other as if assessing each other anew. "I've come with an offer," Vanessa finally said. "We want you back at Osbury Shipping. Any terms you want. An official position, a share of the profits, whatever. My father is willing to discuss any options." Ellis smiled softly but shook her head. "It's impossible, Vanessa. I've started my own business. I already have clients, commitments to them. I can't just drop everything and come back as if nothing happened." "But the company will go under without you," exclaimed Vanessa. "Don't you care?" "Of course I care," Ellis replied calmly. "I worked at Osbury Shipping for 6 years and put part of my life into it, and I have a lot of respect for your father. But I can't go back to being a secretary, even with a promotion. Especially now that I've experienced what it's like to be my own boss." Vanessa slumped, realizing that this option was indeed unrealistic. She couldn't blame Ellis. She would have done the same in her place. "But," Ellis continued, "there may be another option. We could consider working together." "Collaborate?" Vanessa asked incredulously. "How?" "A strategic partnership between Merrow Logistics and Osbury Shipping," Ellis explained. "I have clients and experience managing relationships with them, but I don't have my own fleet or warehouse space yet. I use third-party carriers, which is not always efficient. Osbury Shipping has the resources, but lacks customers." Vanessa thought about it. The idea was unexpected, but made sense. "How do you see it working in practice?" "I'll continue to work with clients directly," Ellis explained. "That's what I'm good at and what they value. But for the physical transportation, I'll use Osbury Shipping on an exclusive basis rather than random contractors like we do now. We'll split the profits according to each party's contribution. Over time, if the collaboration is successful, we can consider closer integration." "Why are you offering this?" asked Vanessa. "After the way I treated you?" Ellis shrugged. "Because it makes business sense. I'm a practical person, Vanessa. Resentment is a poor advisor in business decisions. Besides, I really care about Norton and don't want him to lose his life's work." She paused, then added, "And, to be honest, I lack some of the things you have. Formal business education, experience working in large companies, understanding of financial instruments. I built my knowledge on the job, through trial and error. Your experience could complement mine if we could work together instead of against each other." Vanessa was struck by this admission. Ellis, whom she had considered a cocky upstart, was actually wise enough to recognize her limitations and seek mutually beneficial solutions. I think my father would like that idea, Vanessa said slowly. And you're right, we really could have complementary skills. I learned a lot at Harvard, but the last few weeks have shown me that theory and practice can be very different. They're not mutually exclusive, Ellis remarked. You just have to know how to apply theory to a specific situation and the human factor. Vanessa nodded, feeling her respect for this young woman she had so underestimated grow. I need to discuss this with my father, she said. But personally, I think your suggestion is an excellent idea. And I'd like to hear your story someday. How you became who you are. I made a mistake in judging you by appearances, and I don't want to repeat it. Ellis smiled, this time sincerely and warmly. I'd love to tell you, she said. Over a cup of coffee, once we've settled the business matters. Vanessa stood up, holding out her hand. It's a deal, and I'm sorry again for everything. I was a conceited fool. You were inexperienced and scared. Ellis corrected her gently, shaking her hand. And you were trying to apply what you had been taught without understanding the specific situation. It's an understandable mistake. The important thing is to learn from it. Returning to the Osbury shipping office, Vanessa felt a strange sense of relief. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy, its reputation in tatters, its clients lost. And yet, for the first time in those terrible weeks, she felt hope. Ellis's offer opened up a new perspective, an opportunity not just to restore what had been lost, but to create something better. Her father listened to her account of her meeting with Ellis and the idea of a partnership with a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, he said when Vanessa finished, I always suspected that Ellis would want more than just working for me one day. She has an entrepreneurial streak. I just didn't think it would happen so dramatically. Do you accept her offer? Vanessa asked. Norton nodded. Yes, it's a reasonable compromise. More than that, it could be a new phase of growth for both companies. But there's one condition. What is it? You will represent our side in this partnership, Norton said firmly. You made a mess. Now you clean it up. Work with Ellis, learn from her, bring your knowledge and experience to the table. Together you can create something remarkable. Vanessa swallowed the lump in her throat. You still trust me after everything I've done? Norton smiled gently. You're my daughter, Vanny, and you're a smart girl, just a little cocky. This experience has been painful, but it's a valuable lesson. Now you understand that real business isn't just about processes and structures, but above all about people and relationships. He took her hand. I know you'll do well. You're both smart, talented women. Instead of competing, you can complement each other. Ellis with her practical experience and intuition, you with your education and analytical thinking. This could be the beginning of something really worthwhile. Vanessa nodded, feeling her eyes fill with tears of gratitude. She didn't deserve such trust after everything she had done, but she was determined to prove him right. Thank you, Dad, she said quietly. I won't let you down, and I won't let Ellis down. I've learned a lot over the past few weeks, and the most important thing is never to judge people by their job or education. A person's true value is determined by their actions, not their titles. Norton looked at his daughter with pride. Perhaps this crisis would ultimately benefit the company and all of them.